Hello, Galaxy. I'm Chris Perillo, and I'm going to talk about iOS. Again. I'd say for the 16th time, but let's face it, I've probably talked about iOS more than that over the years. Going to go ahead and give you a Cliff Notes version. iOS is not my favorite mobile platform, not by a long shot. It used to be, and then iOS 7 was released. And since iOS 7, it's not really been my favorite. I still use it on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, I installed not the beta, but the final version of iOS 16 on my iPhone 13 Pro Max, knowing full well that my iPhone 14 Pro Max is coming not on launch day, because despite logging on and actually pre-ordering the pre-order on Apple's website, you could go the day before the iPhone 14 pre-order and enter all your information to just press a button at checkout and make it seamless. Allegedly. Apple's website did not load for like 5 minutes, and by the time I got through to pre-order the iPhone 14 Pro Max that I had already staged to pre-order, it was already delayed by a week. The model that I wanted. Of course, I wanted like pure black. Give me black, 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 black. I like my devices just black. I know everyone goes gaga over the colors. I'm like, I'm good with black. I'm happy. I always have been, probably always will be. Just assume that's going to be my favorite color moving forward. iOS 16 has, honestly, not been that much different from iOS 15 from a general usability perspective, from a user experience perspective, certainly not from a user interface perspective. So any kind of changes have largely been iterative, important changes, small changes. But the thing that I look for when it comes to using any device is not the hardware, right? It's the software. That's the thing that I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to hyper-focus on it because that's the thing I care about. That's the thing that makes it sing or scream or me sing or scream. You don't want to hear me sing, and you've heard me scream plenty of times. So I installed iOS 16, not really expecting much because I had just been using iOS 15 for the few days prior, looking at a few things. I still use the iPhone, not as a daily driver, but I use it primarily as a camera in live streaming environments or when I'm doing any kind of local recording. I use it when I stream sometimes onto MakerDeck as well. So I hadn't used iOS in a while and then started using it again and still noticed the micro jumps. And I would say pronounced lag, sometimes worse in certain apps than in others, but certainly in seeing iOS 15 side by side, let's say with the flagship from Samsung, the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, the Samsung is far snappier, far more responsive. The scroll just is supremely more fluid, side by side with iOS 15. So iOS 16 doesn't seem to be as bad. That's an accolade, by the way. That's about as good as it's going to get from me as far as, a compliment to iOS. I'm still not a fan of the general user experience. I can use it. I understand how it works. But I believe that a good portion of that fluidity concern that I've had with iOS has been mitigated, at least with the initial release of iOS 16. I've run into other bugs. How I wish Apple would take its time, just a little more time, with the fit and finish, and not just release a feature, but implement that feature, because it's not the feature, it's the implementation. See, this is the story that you'll hear everybody say, and they're right, when they say that Apple didn't adopt the always-on display until it was the right thing to do with the iPhone 14 devices. And I don't disagree with that. It seems to be a fluid implementation of always-on. We'll get to that as soon as I get my iPhone 14 a week after everybody else gets it. So by the time I talk about it, it'll be an irrelevant conversation. But that's the thing. If they wait for other features and implementing those other features until they can get it right, I can't really predict if Search or Spotlight or Siri or whatever it is when you search on the home screen. If I can't get this to work right, one time, why would I rely on it? Why would you rely on any software that was inconsistent? Well, you probably wouldn't. Because if you have a haphazard experience, it's a haphazard experience. So iOS 16 feels a little smoother than iOS 15. Marginally, not like leaps and bounds. I don't know if the new iPhone is going to mitigate that at all, because there really hasn't been that much of a speed bump in the new versions of iPhone's hardware, or Apple's hardware in general. But that's also the thing. The software is the thing that now needs to be improved. Like, I'm not saying we've hit the law of diminishing returns for a lot of these hardware experiences, because they're going to keep pushing the speeds. Give me as much speed as we can. That's technology. It's a race that never ends. I love it. I eat it up. Give me as much performance as I can possibly get. But when the software can't keep pace with the hardware, you've got a problem. And the software really hasn't felt that much more responsive in recent iPhone or iOS generations. So I'll be curious. With a minor speed bump, I believe, in single CPU core performance. I don't have the hardware, don't have access, had to pay for it with my own money. Just like this device, just like darn near every device I get. But my experience so far has been a good one. I kept playing around with it, thinking, could I use this? Could I use this phone over my current daily driver? The answer isn't about the hardware. That answer is probably not going to change when the iPhone 14 gets here. Sorry, iPhone 14 Pro Max. Because it's not a hardware story for me, it's a software story. So iOS 16 is dramatically better than some earlier versions from iOS 7 to iOS 15. But I did notice in certain scrolling behaviors, specifically when like images are kind of loading, what happens, and this is the best explanation for it, is that you've got a smooth scroll and then it stops and then it jumps. So smooth scroll, stop, and jump. And it happens. It's like a fraction of a second. But those people who have sharp eyes, who can see the difference between a 60 hertz screen and 120 hertz, and believe you me, I absolutely can. An iPhone or an iPad with ProMotion display makes the software so much better. So much. I can't even consider any other iOS. I can't even consider any other computer screen that's not running 120 frames per second at least. So it's largely fluid. But then I ran into the standard now iOS hiccups. Smooth scroll stops and then jumps. Happens across apps. But iOS 16, at least this version, the initial release version, has seemingly mitigated a lot of it. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So that, I gotta say, I was not expecting at all. That was my initial impression. I was like, huh. Twitter scrolls a little cleaner. Google Photos is still a jank fest. Sometimes when you scroll lists and it has to catch up, you get the lag. It's a software optimization problem. It's obviously not the hardware. This hardware is more than ample. But then I look at how it scrolls, how an app scrolls, and I may be using the same app on an Android device. And more often than not, we're talking like, let's say third-party apps like Stocard. I don't know if you've used this app before. It's called Stocard, S-T-O-C-A-R-D. It's free, cross-platform. It allows you to store all your affinity cards, like your store cards, and you can hold up a barcode and then they scan it, or a QR code and they scan it. You know, when you go to your loyalty cards, right? And I've used it for years, and it's always had really poor scrolling performance on iOS. It's slightly more smooth on iOS 16 than it was on 15. So that tells me that a system-level optimization must have taken place. But it's still not nearly as smooth as the same app on Android. And that's not the only app that seems to perform better on Android than iOS. And I'm not talking about how fast it launches. I'm talking about using it. actually using the app, like where you're spending most of your time. And that's where I still find my initial impressions with iOS 16 is it still doesn't match the same level of fluidity as Android. And I mean, I've got too many phones lying around. I'm using my Pixel right now as well as a webcam using re-incubate camo. Talked about that in the past. Be happy to talk about it again. But I mean, I'm using these devices, so I'm seeing them side by side. This is not a matter of hating. It's a matter of wanting. It's a matter of expecting. It's a matter of anticipating that the next experience I'm going to have on this device is going to be a good one. And so Apple has cleaned up some of the cruft. I've run into a couple of issues of slop with iOS. This first version, that may get cleaned up. It's just fresh out of beta. But as a performer, I gotta tell you, I'm pretty happy with iOS 16 over iOS 15 for general fluidity, with a little asterisk by that. So I also hope to talk about my favorite new features of iOS 16 in the coming days. There are a few that jump out at me, and I hope to talk about that before I get the new iPhone, because that's a completely different conversation. I'm glad to be able to talk about this stuff, because I do it anyway. I think about it anyway. I'm always reading the news, always. I'm always immersed in the news. It's just that, I do things somewhat differently. I think different.